You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster Podcast. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the iHeartRadio app, or your preferred podcast platform. Enjoy. Well, on the bright side, hey, at least we still got the NFL draft. That's still going to be a thing. It's going to be much like this podcast through Zoom or FaceTime or whatever have you, but we at least have an NFL draft. But that said, we have some interesting kind of like stories we want to kind of like talk to you about. So first off, so you as a former scout, what would you be doing this time of like year, like leading up to the draft?
I would say Tuesday. So if the draft's next Thursday, if you were a road scout, had an area, you would usually head to your team, I would say probably by Saturday or Sunday. And then anything final, any information. You might have a light meeting on Monday. I know we always had like a team dinner on like Tuesday, where all the scouts would get, it'd be back when you could go out and eat dinner. You'd get a big table and, you'd get cocktails. And again, because you got another day and a half leading up to the draft. I talked to a buddy that's on a good team, and he's like, "We've been ready for weeks." I think it's a little different when you have high picks. Everyone's on edge. When you're drafting like the 20s, or even I'd say 15 and on, so much is out of your control. Once you get all the information, once you set your board. Maybe 15 in this draft, you kind of have a decent idea, but I'd say anything 20 and on. So many curveballs happen. Like, what if 3 guys go that no one's talking about being top 20 picks, then all of a sudden it pushes players down? So I think most of the teams in the playoffs, their front office is working just as their team goes, deep into January. So once they go to the Senior Bowl and the Combine, then they kind of link up, and so much is out of your control unless you're drafting really high. And then I think you feel the pressure. When I was on the Eagles, we never had a high pick until I guess that last year when Chip Kelly came in and it was Lane Johnson. I think we drafted like top 5, but it feels different, I think, when you're drafting top anywhere from 1 to 10, just because that player in theory, now the irony is you can get a guy at 19 who's better than the guy at 8. But at the time, like on draft night, we're going to feel like most of the guys drafted really high are going to be the best players. That's just the reality of the draft, even though 2 years from now, that's just not going to be the case, right? We're going to have guys drafted in the second and third round. Some of the best players in the last several drafts, right? Think of all the star players that have come in the second and third round these last several years, from Alvin Kamara to Michael Thomas. I mean, you're talking the best players in the league at their position. The Niners middle linebacker, Fred Warner, who was one of the better middle linebackers of the league last year, was a third-round pick. But on draft night, it wasn't that sexy. I love the draft, and it's awesome. But our reactions, Sunday and Monday, once we have the whole draft, is all based on whether we like the guy. You never see a team on round 1, right? Whoever they pick with their first-round pick, whatever your pick is, they're always high-fiving and hugging, right, in the draft room. Everyone's really excited, and then we know half those players are not going to live up to their first-round billing.
What would you say, like, is the biggest thing that separates, like, good teams from bad teams on draft day? Is it just all about having that plan going in?
A huge element of it is your front office and your coaching staff, so working together. So, most guys, I'd say, in the top 3 rounds can play. Are legitimate NFL players, like guys that have the talent. But a lot of it is based on what they're going to ask you to do, especially for, you could say quarterbacks too, what offense you're going to ask them to run. But a defensive lineman or a corner, there are major differences in certain schemes. And you see a guy that just sucks for a couple years, and then all of a sudden he goes to another team and he's good. It happens all the time. And I think scheme related, and that stuff out of the scouts' hands. So that's back to your question, why does some organizations do it better than others? I think the cohesion of the scouts and the coaches, like everyone speaks the same language. And when you have everyone speaks the same language, I think you limit your misses and you just limit your ability, because you're still, like any job, you're hiring a human. So you're going to hire a guy and here's the other thing. This is a job where even for the non-first round picks, if I draft a guy in the second round, I'm still probably giving him $1 million signing bonus or whatever. That's a lot of money. And you always ask, like, how will this guy react to money? You talk about this in scouting meetings, and you give your best answer, what you've talked to their coaches and their academic advisors and like how they've treated people that meant nothing in the program, right? Like the equipment manager or like, the trainer's wife or just random people that he didn't need to be. And you can kind of gauge it, but you're still guessing. Some guys just don't. I wouldn't have. I'm much more mature with money at 35 than I would have been at 22. So there's just so much pressure on those guys too to perform. And then they got all this cash. It's not an easy situation. It's why it speaks to the guys that are able to handle it from the jump and just be high level guys. Like, it shows you they could probably do anything in society, because that pressure, handling that pressure and not being unfazed by how much money you have. We all like to say that we could do it. If I handed you, $10 million tomorrow, would you keep cranking out podcasts? Do you like to do it? mean, because at the end of the day, football players or any high-level person that gets paid young in life and it maintains and sustains a high level of play, like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady's still going right now. He ain't doing it for the money. He's doing it because he loves it. He's a junkie. I mean, he's a football junkie. And I'd say football more than basketball and baseball. You work so hard to not play that many games. So the studying, the meetings, you just go to meetings after meetings, especially in the NFL. And I think a lot of these guys get used to it that are coming from big college programs because they approach it like the NFL. But there are still restrictions in college. Like, I'm sure teams push the envelope, but there are still only so many hours because they still got to go to class. You got to allow them to eat. You got to allow them to go to academic advisors. Where in football, you're just in the building and you got to study, and then you're always changing your game plans for opponents. It can mentally wear you out as much as physically. I just know being in the building, being like, this is crazy, and the coaches, and it's just an intense environment. And some guys thrive in that environment. Like, speaking of the Niners, like Richard Sherman, Joe Staley, they were made for it. Kyle Juszczyk. It seems like Fred Warner, the guy the Niners traded, Buckner. I mean, Buckner's born to play football and everything that comes along with it. That's why I think when you see Eric Armstead gets paid, you're like, we hope he can just sustain this. But I know Buckner's got 4 years every day punching the clock and whatever it takes, and then playing well. That's where it gets more complicated once you hit on picks. Like, who do you pay? It's just a complicated business because you're all these people. It's not like most businesses are just kind of black and white, right? It's just like, you do this, you get paid this much. And this is our service. This is our product. People change nonstop. And it's just injuries, your age. It's tough. And the thing about the draft is you're guessing about younger players, kind of projecting how much better can they get, and then factoring in all the stuff I talked about, like handling the pressure and the money.
That's why I couldn't honestly imagine being in the NBA, like trying to figure out the dynamics of high school scouting when they talk about taking away the 1-year eligibility, going to each and every high school trying to figure out 18-year-olds.
It makes sense why the NBA front offices like it the way it is. If they could choose, right, they would probably have multiple years. In football, you don't even worry about it. Like, you have great players in college right now that if this was the NBA, Trevor Lawrence, the kid Chase at LSU, like all these guys that, imagine throwing all those guys in the mix right now. It'd be crazy. But luckily, you just know, you're like, I don't even need to waste time on them right now. With great players, you're always asking about them. But, I mean, if you're going into LSU, you better know the running back, the quarterback, Justin Jefferson, Queen, Del Pitt, like all the guys that are coming out. Like, you got another 8 months to deal with Jamar Chase or whoever their next guy is. Where in basketball, it's like, God, any of these guys could declare at any moment,
Guess the NCAA doesn't have to worry about the XFL poaching their 18-year-old players anymore, after all.
No, they don't.